Well, that didn't take very long, did it? Labour bitten in for just over a month and the blame game continues. Labour are already blaming the Conservatives, claiming the situation is far worse than expected. The perfect excuse, laying the foundations to raise taxes. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would bet this is the point that the tax rises begin. Now, before I get an onslaught of people blaming the Tories, let me just say I think these two are just as bad as each other, and I don't like either of them. Neither of them are particularly far right or far left, they both sit somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the murky waters. I think it's pretty appalling that the political system is designed in such a way to keep these two at the top, with no one else really standing a chance. We now have a high majority Labour government with, let's face it, pretty dismal opposition. We had the most disproportionate UK general election result in history. And get this, Labour won almost 2/3 of the MPs with just 1/3 of the votes. Just 96 out of the 650 MPs were elected with a majority vote in their area. And perhaps most shocking of all is the vote itself. As expected, Labour and the Conservatives got most of the votes. But then we've got the Liberal Democrats getting 3.5 million votes and winning 72 seats, and Reform getting 4.1 million votes and winning just 5 seats. To give that a bit more context, that means that the Lib Dems got 48,877 votes per seat and Reform got 823,522 votes per seat that they actually won. If we add in the Labour and Conservative numbers, 23,000 for Labour and 56,000 for the Conservatives, we can see the mass disparity between votes and how many seats were given. This just reiterates how a true representation of people's views in the UK doesn't exist. The amount of people I've spoke to who just thought they would try Labour or wanted a change and they were the only option, as there's no belief anyone else has a chance, or more commonly, they don't feel that any party truly represents their views and have to just go for who they think is the least bad option. It's pretty sad. Most of the time, it seems that people don't even know what the policies are of the parties that they voted for. What annoys me is, I think for the most part, I believe if any random number of us sat in a room, we'd all pretty much agree on what should be done. And it makes you wonder, why is there all this disparity and why on earth are we all paying for it? So what are they actually arguing about? Money, of course, which is what the root of all the problems boils down to. It's no secret that the country is in an awful financial state. Rachel Reeves had a big reveal claiming that there's a 22 billion black hole in the nation's finances that she didn't know about. This is made up of 11.6 in pay awards that she's agreed to and a whopping 6.4 billion in asylum and illegal immigration, most of which is made up from hotel bills from the backlog of claims of people who aren't being processed. We now have around 100,000 people receiving support for accommodation, of which nearly 50,000 are being put up in hotels at a staggering cost of $3 billion per year. This is a monumental policy failure. Whatever the numbers are coming in, the failure to process them and failure to find better value accommodation is unforgivable. This past Monday marked a new record in over 700 people arriving in 11 boats in a single day. I watched a video last week of a legal immigrant who came to this country who was questioning why he's paid over £8,000 over 5 years to go through the legal process of immigration. He's got a British wife, he's worked the entire time paying tax and providing for his kids, and if he would have come on a boat the illegal way, he would have had it all for free. Free accommodation and free healthcare. Now, don't get me wrong, legal immigration has huge benefits, and I do believe if you're born in this country, you essentially have the winning lottery ticket after seeing some of the conditions I've seen people live in. A brilliant film to watch is The Swimmers, which shows how difficult the journey is to come to a safe country, which did shift my perspective. I've also employed people who have lived in countries with poor conditions for years. In fact, my main employee who's worked for me for over 10 years had to flee their country because they faced imprisonment for life or execution, which is crazy. But despite that, it doesn't help the ease of the burn, knowing with boatloads of people arriving every day who are essentially just getting everything handed to them, and our government seems to be doing very little about it, except doing what they do best, spending hundreds of millions on projects that get axed and completely go to waste. £291 million spent on Rwanda, just gone. And now they want us to pay even more for the money of ours that they've already wasted. That could have funded 7 billion GP appointments. Couple that with the fact we're giving out money left, right and centre, but can't fix problems in our own country, it just seems completely backwards. I mean, I'm no rocket scientist, but how we're giving away cash when we're 2.7 trillion in debt is a question itself. When I heard the news of this shocking black hole that's magically appeared, I thought, oh boy, here we go. I mean, did they really not know about it? It seems awfully convenient. It's been claimed that they knew in May and June, and that the Treasury, officials, Home Office, Transport and Permanent Secretary all have a responsibility to act to go to the Public Accounts Committee, and nobody raised anything. To be honest though, no one comes out of this smelling like roses. The Conservatives left a lot for the new government to clear up, and weren't honest about the challenges ahead. Labour knew the broad outline of these challenges, but refused to confront them in its manifesto and pre-election statements. And what about our institutional framework? Why was this all just pushed to the side? Someone knew about it, if not all of them. I wanted to take a moment to talk about something quite important that I feel is increasing more lately, and that's the toll that these situations take on us. It feels now more than ever there's a real emphasis on how bad everything is, with talk of these taxes and pressures being put in place. It almost feels like despite trying to do the right thing, you're always a target. It's something I personally felt, having spent years building up my investments. The thought of my hard work being taken away from me after I've sacrificed so much to get here is taking a real toll. And it almost leaves you feeling like, what's the point? Recently, while moving house, I felt a real pressure, in part constantly by people sharing how bad the UK is, and how they're escaping to other countries for a better life. It's only after speaking with people close to me in my life I've been able to see past the surface level on these and realise that people have problems everywhere, and we're really lucky to be in such a fortunate position in the first place. I'm the type of person that can spend a long time thinking about problems and trying to make the best out of every situation, and it's something I still struggle with to this day. I'm lucky I've found people that I can confide in, but for those who don't and they're not in that situation or would prefer to keep it anonymous as money can be a sensitive subject, I'd recommend BetterHelp, who I'm really pleased to say is a paid partner of today's video as it's a subject close to my heart. BetterHelp can connect you with a credentialed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful and, the most importantly, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site and you can use the link in the description below. You answer a few questions and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. You can do it all from your phone or computer, via call, video chat or messaging, however you feel more comfortable. You'll be matched with a therapist usually within 48 hours so you can get started fast. Let BetterHelp connect you with a therapist who can support you all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/Chris Palmer or choose Chris Palmer during the sign-up process to enjoy a special discount on your first month. The truth is, none of this fundamentally changes anything in the long run. Rachel Reeves can't honestly announce a set of tax rises in the October budget and blame it all on this magic black hole that she's just discovered, and that she couldn't have ever imagined how these tax rises would have been necessary. It's obvious to anyone who bothered to look, and I'm willing to bet they did, but it's more convenient to blame the Tories. The Conservatives cut $20 billion from national insurance contributions, which realistically couldn't be afforded, and Labour aren't planning on raising income tax or VAT. So where is the rest going to come from? The takeover from the Tories may have been worse than expected, but as Paul Johnson, director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, points out, most of the black hole was already visible, and part of it is accounted for by her own spending decisions, which she announced last week. It also seems to be unclear whether the Office for Budget Responsibility was informed by Treasury officials about the real state of the books, and if they had a part to play. These same people are now reporting to the new government too. There are suspicions that Treasury officials were leaned on in what they could reveal in the run-up to the election. A lot of people felt pretty shocked that Labour didn't immediately lift the two-child cap on benefits, which is causing poverty for hundreds of thousands of families. People were pretty furious that we can pledge another $3 billion per year to Ukraine and not support this UK poverty. They also haven't implemented Sir Andrew Dilnot's recommendations for the limit on contributions to people having to make social care in old age. These savings are minimal in comparison with the $20 billion of tax cuts introduced by the Tories before, which were opposed by Labour at the time, but now they're surprisingly allowed to stand. You would think, since they were so opposed to them at the time, that when they would have got in, they would have just reversed them. This is what leads to the muddy overlap and why there's far little difference between the two parties now than there once was. The truth is they're both tiptoeing around the state we're actually in. Neither of the campaigns addressed the real problem, as highlighted by the IFS, who addresses both the Conservatives and Labour are joining in a conspiracy of silence. What this means is that neither are really addressing the big problems. The numbers from the Chancellor that Labour haven't denied imply the big spending cuts in the next 5 years unless there's big tax rises, or they break their promises about getting debt down. So where are the cuts going to come from? Well, there's been one pretty shocking cut so far, and that's to pensioners. In my previous videos, I talked about how I think pensioners are going to be some of the worst hit by their plans, and it's already started. Labour have decided to scrap winter fuel payments for pensioners and that it'd only be available to those on pension credit in an attempt to raise $1.5 billion, which is pretty mean. The payments were brought in to try and help older people who were struggling paying for their heating bills. Former Pensions Minister Sir Steve Webb warned that the move could trigger a wave of pension credit applications, with 800,000 people who currently don't claim the benefit who are eligible according to Charity Aid UK. In 2019, claims rose by a quarter when the government announced free TV licences would be restricted to just those on pension credit according to the OBR. They could save $1.5 billion, but it could cost almost a third of that in more people claiming pension credit. Aid UK Director Caroline Abrahams said that pensioners were £600 worse off than they were last year thanks to the Chancellor. She said this coming winter, pensioners who depend on staying warm for their health will be facing unprecedented withdrawal of help with paying for the still high energy bills, and one unmatched by any other group in our society. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's probably some people that can afford the cut, but like anything, it's never the people who are well off who are the ones that suffer. It's the ones who have tried to be a little bit better off than basic who have suffered the most. My granddad, for example, worked for the council his entire life. He never earned a lot of money, but they work so hard to save a bit and he gets a tiny small private pension, which doesn't pay him much at all. He's going to lose this winter fuel payment, which will have a huge knock-on effect to him. He used to never have the heating on, would regularly wear t-shirts in cold weather and say he's a roughy-toughy council worker. These days he wears coats inside and the heating costs him a small fortune. Not to mention energy prices now are so much higher. The very least they could have done with these plans is to lift the threshold to help people in the situation. I think out of all the things they could have done, this is perhaps one of the meanest ways they could have started. Martin Lewis said that the targeting of winter fuel payments is too narrow with the winter we have coming. Pensioners were already due to get less than this. It'll be the first time since the winter 2022 that they haven't got that extra payment of up to £300. The energy price cap is likely to rise 10% this October and stay high across the winter, leaving energy bills at nearly double those pre-crisis at levels unaffordable for millions. Many pensioners eke out the £100 to £300 winter fuel payments to allow them to keep some heating on through the cold months. While there's an argument for ending its universability due to tight national finances, it's being squeezed too narrow a group, just those on benefits and pension credit. Yet again, those above the thresholds will be the hardest hit. It's crazy to even say this, but now pensioners on pension credit are better off than those receiving full state pension, which seems totally wrong. And let's remember that the Labour Chief Secretary in opposition said that pensioners must not be forced to bear the brunt of Tory economic failure. A bleak reminder that we can't trust a word they say. The best summary I heard was, now we know who will pay. Old folks on modest pensions. And surprise, surprise, it's finally been admitted what we knew was coming all along. On Newsagent podcast, Rachel Reeves said,
I think we will have to increase taxes in the budget.
Shall we all take a second to act shocked? The truth is, they always knew if they want to address the real issues, they need to raise tax. So their options are 1, ignore the issues, or 2, raise taxes. So the question is, where are these tax rises going to come from? The autumn statement is going to be pretty grim, because after the pensioners' fuel cut, it's understood that $16 billion is still needed to bridge the gap this year. So what's going to be next? This is a really good image which represents the current state of the tax system in the UK. We can see income tax at $276 billion, VAT at $197 billion, and national insurance at $180 billion. These are the main drivers of tax, making up over 50% of the total tax generated. During the election campaign, Labour ruled out increasing income tax, national insurance, VAT, or corporation tax. They've committed to reform business rates, so there's unlikely no increase there. Stamp taxes and bank taxes are already probably past the point where more can be raised. Custom duties are complicated by trade treaties. Raising insurance and premium tax would be strained without raising VAT. And raising alcohol duty would be unpopular out of proportion to its significance. And Labour have already planned to increase oil and gas taxation. So what does this leave? About 150 billion of taxes. These are the possible targets. Capital gains tax, I think, is rife for the picking. Capital gains is charged on profit made from the sale of assets which increased in value, such as stocks not held in an ISA or second homes. It's payable by individuals but also by self-employed sole traders as well as other businesses. It starts at a rate of 10% or 18% on residential property on profits over 3k, but then it rises to 20% on any amount above the basic tax rate. Critics will point out that CGT rates are much lower than income tax and say that this could benefit wealthier people more, so she could opt to level the playing field. However, what Labour have to be careful of is that this targets people with huge assets and not small businesses who are trying to grow, as she needs to grow the economy. Tina McKenzie from the Federation of Small Business said that no government at all serious about growth would hike CGT on entrepreneurs selling a small business. Investing in a small business is already one of the least tax efficient things anyone can do with their money. The problem is with these policies, like we've seen with the pensioners' winter fuel payments, they don't seem to be very considerate for the smaller man. They just go for a one-size-fits-all policy, and the people in the middle are the ones getting hurt, instead of targeting the real culprits. People who are worth over 600 million paying 20% in tax, like Rishi Sunak. On the chopping block after this, we've got VAT for private schools, which they've already announced, again which will just hurt the people in the middle. And the big one I'm fearing them cutting back on is tax on pension relief. When people or employers pay into private pension pots, they receive tax relief on those contributions up to set limits. The relief allows some of a person's earnings that may have been taken by the government in tax to go into their savings for retirement instead. Under the current system, savers receive tax relief at the same rate as their income tax, meaning basic rate taxpayers receive 20% and higher rate pay 40 or 45%. There's often speculation that a flat rate of pension tax relief could be introduced. This would mean that the system is less generous for high earners, but the IFS has suggested this could raise billions for the government. Some opponents have said, however, that this could dissuade people from saving for the future and might be difficult to implement. I do think there's a really fine line balancing on this one, because let's be honest, if you can afford to whack £60,000 in a pension each year, which I definitely can't, you're going to smash out a pension much quicker than other people, and it could be more fair. But I also don't agree with the high levels of tax that high earners are expected to pay either, so I would like to see it balance out. Even with a flat rate of tax, you earn more money, you pay more tax. Maybe something in the middle at 30% tax relief would be more fair. But let's be honest, they're not going to reduce tax, are they? One of the more likely taxes to be changed is inheritance tax. Inheritance tax is charged at 40% on the value of an estate above $325,000 when someone dies. The tax rate could be increased or the threshold could be lowered to raise more money. There are currently several exemptions, including on agricultural land and family businesses, but these could be lifted to include them. The government could also reduce the number of years allowed when giving away asset before someone dies before inheritance tax kicks in. As let's face it, a lot of people do that to avoid inheritance tax in the first place. A leaked recording from March revealed that now Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, saying that inheritance tax could be used to redistribute wealth and address intergenerational equality. The same recording also talked about council tax. He was frustrated by the out-of-date council tax system and hinted that homes worth over $1 million may have to pay more. But during election campaign, Labour said that they would not change the council tax bands. Council tax is currently set in bands that are based on the value of 1991 value of homes, which has been branded as absurd by the IFS and incredibly poorly designed. They've said that council tax could be reformed in a very sensible way. Rather than having a banded system, you could have something that's much more proportional to the tax on land revenue. They say that you could do a sensible structural reform and raise some extra money at the same time. So I think they're the main ones that we'll need to watch out for. I do think that they could bring England in line with Wales, because Wales is already at 2003 values, which doesn't really seem fair. The big disparity I see is that anyone buying a new property now could pay so much more council tax than someone who had the same value house in 1991, which is crazy. So I think they're the main ones we'll need to watch out for. But let's not forget the real tax that's battering us all at the moment is the stealth tax. The most obvious tax to focus on is a tax threshold, the amount of money anyone can earn before they start to pay tax. Currently, the thresholds on income tax and national insurance are frozen until 2028, policy brought in by the previous government, but Labour could extend them to beyond this date, costing us way more tax. The policy amounts to a tax rise because of a process called fiscal drag, which sees more people dragged into paying higher rates of tax as their wages rise. The Resolution Foundation, which is a think tank that aims to improve the living standards for low to middle income families, calculates that the current freeze will generate $40 billion of revenue by 2028. The director said that it may address a shortfall in public finances, meaning that Rachel Reeves wouldn't have to raise any other taxes. So rather than them actually increasing tax, they could leave the thresholds where they are. They could also reduce things like pension relief and drag more of us into paying more income tax without actually raising income tax, acting like they're this super clean government who don't raise taxes. I think this claim annoys me more than anything. If they're looking at cutting costs, why not take a look at the MP's salaries? £91,346, up 5.5% this year. I'm sure there would be plenty of people happy to do the job for half the wage who would be far more representative of the real people in our country. But that won't happen because it's designed not to happen. We'll be stuck in this constant cycle of them splurging out our money and then making us pay even more money that they can then splurge again down the drain. It's crazy. I'll do a deeper dive on these tax possibilities as there's so many to list, and I will keep you posted as more news comes out. The budget will be the biggest shocker this year, I think, and I don't think anyone will be looking forward to that. Let's just pray that it's not a case of a ton of taxes and playing this broken record of a black hole as an excuse, which I think will be the case. If you want to check out my investment plans and what I'm doing, you can check out this detailed breakdown I made, and subscribe, turn notifications on, and I'll keep you posted as things develop. I think I need to lie down. Thanks.